In the ancient epochs, long before the Earth was ever defined by mankind, there lived a creature that carried the ultimate gentleness of the entire Cretaceous period within the most petite of bodies. It possessed a pair of vast wings capable of gliding across the primordial skies, along with two iconic, elegant long-tail feathers that transcended the limits of gender and time. Yet, this anatomical structure, which almost claimed all the splendor upon the clamorous earth and overflowed with poetic implications, dissolved into the most reassuring paradox of destiny at midnight. Tonight, beside the gently flickering hearth, let us journey into her true life through this story that requires no effort to remember. Her name was Confuciusornis. In the starry compendium of ancient life, she was never a ruthless protagonist that dominated through crushing rocks or bloody slaughter. As the curtain of night fully drapes the world, she rests silently atop the branch of a colossal, flourishing ancient ginkgo tree, surrounded by an endless, silent, and deep primordial forest. The gentle moonlight pierces through the dense fan-shaped leaves, spilling dappled silver over her splendid yet soft primitive feathers, plating each quill with a coat of fuzzy light. Just at this moment, a gentle breeze rustles through the woods. The ginkgo branch, carrying her petite frame, begins to sway with an exceptionally light and rhythmic cadence in the night wind. Submissively, she retracts all her daytime splendor, slowly tucking her tiny head with its ancient horny beak into her thick wings, beginning to breathe rhythmically to the tempo of the swaying branch. Devoid of any land behemoth's predatory roar or companion's panic in the dark, there is only her long, deep respiration, sending silent ripples through the quiet foliage. This sound is so tender, so low, that it seems to merge seamlessly with the very pulse of the entire forest, compelling anyone who hears it to slow their own breath. On this quiet night, nothing needs to be rushed, much like this ancient long-feathered creature transformed into a silent midnight landscape upon the ginkgo tree canopy. What we are about to unfold is not a scientific chronicle of brutal survival, but the gentlest subterranean poem written by a solitary wing in the age of dinosaurs. Please close your eyes, listen to the soft rustling of the ginkgo leaves nudged by the breeze, and let us walk into the hidden, eternal night guarded by the Confuciusornis for hundreds of millions of years. In the very beginning, fate did not arrange any broad, worry-free path of evolution for the Confuciusornis. Instead, it forced her to face a dual dilemma from the moment of birth. She was born on the East Asian continent during the early Cretaceous, a savage era full of unknown variables when the dinosaur lineage began to head toward extreme gigantism and extreme ferocity. As one of the most ancient and primitive pioneers among the first ancient birds in all of life's history, the body structure of the Confuciusornis appeared exceptionally idiosyncratic in a surface world ruled by speed and fangs. Although vast flight feathers had evolved upon her shoulders, her sternum remained underdeveloped, which meant she could never perform the high-frequency, powerful flapping flight of later avian species. For most of her life, she could only rely on climbing tall trees and then, utilizing the power of the wind, undertaking exceptionally slow, exceptionally restrained gliding between the forest canopies. Consequently, the approach of every rainstorm or each tumble from a branch was a fatal crack propelling her destiny to shift, given her complete lack of defensive capabilities on the ground. While the tyrannosaurs and iguanodons on the ground fought violently over the last oasis pastures, exhausting the splendor of their lives under the scorching sun, the Confuciusornis raised her head. She made a crucial choice belonging exclusively to her. She surrendered the power to contest for dignity and strength on the earth, channeling all her patience instead into honing the climbing tips of her claws. Piercing her hard foreclaws into the ancient bark, she climbed upward inch by inch, unhurriedly, until she finally reached the absolute height that those land behemoths could never touch. Standing atop a 100-meter-high redwood canopy, she looked down upon those massive frames locked in frantic slaughter for survival. Those desires and killings were nothing more than smoke scattering with the wind in her eyes. She learned to maintain restraint before the wind arrived, opening her wings only during the twilight hours when the air currents were most stable, gliding gracefully across that quiet, ethereal sky of her own. This retreat from the earth and adherence to height did not turn her into a casualty of the era, rather, it endowed her with the purest survival divinity, insulated from the chaotic world. She bore the psychological cost of gliding, yet she enjoyed the infinite horizon behind that cost, recognizing the boundaries of her own strength. Her inner soul lived as a silent, deep ocean. In the long years to come, she would carry these two-tail feathers, seemingly cumbersome, yet representing the romantic evergreen of life, silently writing her own chapters at the highest peak of the forest. Within this slow-paced forest life of non-contention, the Confuciusornis gradually mapped out a strategy of power evasion and a mastery of mimicry filled with restrained wisdom. The primordial jungle of the early Cretaceous was a colossal labyrinth tightly woven of countless predatory chains. Any petite frame exposed in a clearing could invite devastating aerial claws. Thus, the Confuciusornis strictly confined her core range of activity to the interiors of those ancient ginkgo and cycad forests, packed with dense fan-shaped leaves and wafting a faint aroma year-round. Whenever the first ray of morning sunshine pierced through the water fur canopy, the beasts on the ground began to assemble with roaring echoes, trampling the mud and kicking up gusts of dust and survival anxiety. The Confuciusornis, however, never disdained to join such frenzied daytime gatherings. She simply perched solitarily upon a branch deep within the tree shadows, unhurriedly preening each of her feathers. Her primitive feathers presented a mottled, dark texture identical to the surrounding withered bark and leaf layers. In the dim shade, she was merely a protrusion growing from the trunk. Whenever a coelurosaur with terrifying wings or another aerial predator swept over the jungle canopy with heart-stopping air currents, the Confuciusornis would freeze into absolute stillness in an instant. She pressed her long, elegant tail feathers flat along the growth direction of the branch, tucked her foreclaws, her two jet-black gemstone eyes maintaining absolute composure and restraint in the shadow. She even intentionally slowed her internal heartbeat to a mere fraction of its usual rate, her wing temperature dropping inch by inch along with the cooling environment, leaving not an ounce of vital ripple. Those ferocious hunters, accustomed to capturing running and roaring dynamics, possessed retinas that never generated the slightest suspicion when sweeping across this motionless ancient ginkgo branch, ultimately departing. This aesthetic of stillness displayed amidst extreme danger was the noblest refusal of the Confuciusornis against that frantic era. She did not contest the chaotic world, yet she lived sublimely detached in the shadows. She unhurriedly pecked at those succulent ancient ginkgo fruits hanging from the branches, channeling her surplus energy into a long lifespan capable of defying time, leaving not a single shred of haste behind. Each grinding of fruit was accompanied by a faint, rhythmic swallowing sound echoing within the silent woods, a sound that became her most habitual companion during the long afternoons. As the seasons of the continent quietly shifted into the mid-Cretaceous volcanic winter, the coldest and most food-depleted time, the extreme compression of living space pushed all life to the brink of collapse. Blizzards ravaged the entire northeastern continent without warning, the freezing snowfall completely freezing the once abundant rivers, and vast stretches of fern forests carbonized in large numbers under the cover of frost. Panic and anxiety spread through the dinosaur herds. Many herbivores accustomed to traveling in herds fell into large-scale stampedes because they could find no shelter from the wind, ultimately perishing in their own chaos. Within this brutal bottleneck of an era, the habit of keeping to her simplicity, and the physical traits that the Confuciusornis had long maintained once again revealed an unparalleled structural survival advantage. She never contested with the creatures on the ground for those scarce caves exposed to the wind and snow. She simply returned to the core depths of the ginkgo forest she knew best. The trunks of the colossal ginkgo trees were as thick as several men's embrace, their root systems digging deep into the lowest parts of the earth, still radiating a faint, hidden warmth belonging to the earth amidst the severe cold. The Confuciusornis slowly lowered her body into the thickest, most sheltered bend of the old tree's main trunk, her 4 toe claws clamping firmly onto the coarse bark, binding herself to the old tree. As her frame sank, she completely opened her vast gliding wings, and then, like a thick blanket of black fur, tightly wrapped her entire body in reverse. This warm quilt made of feathers was the world's most perfect thermal insulation layer. It not only locked in every single faint vital spark of body temperature but also completely blocked out the external ice and snow. Her heartbeat was as slow as counting the hourglass of centuries, each dull thud acting like a tender caress injected into this frozen, anxious land. It was during those most severe snowy midnights, when the beasts on the ground shivered in the freezing wind, emitting desperate wails, that she truly transformed into the warmest cradle of this arena. The weakest, most easily overlooked primitive mammals and insects of the forest instinctively began to gather around the trunk of this old ginkgo tree, wafting a gentle heat. They nestled quietly beneath her heavy wings and within the shadow of her vast long tail feathers, sharing body warmth and feeling that peace belonging to the long-feathered sage. Amidst this cross-species, silently protective embrace filled with spiritual tension, the Confuciusornis finally welcomed the gentlest and most fated night of her life. It was a specific night when the cold winter was drawing to a close, and the scent of the soil reclaiming distant spring rains could already be faintly caught in the air. The entire Cretaceous sky was as clear as if it had been washed. The brilliant Milky Way resembled a wide ribbon of stars poured across the black velvet curtain, with countless fragments of golden starlight shimmering silently in the void, illuminating the ancient primordial barrens. The Confuciusornis, entering the twilight of her life, trod upon the coarse bark with steps even slower and more solemn than ever before, returning to her most cherished ginkgo tree branch. Her toe claws, weathered by the eons, had shed their former sharp edges, emitting an exceptionally dull, rhythmic microclick as they gripped the branch, yet her gaze was as clear as lake water. She slowly lowered her body into the center of a circular fork closely enveloped by countless fan-shaped leaves, her two tail feathers spanning dozens of centimeters tracing the gentlest arc in the night breeze. As her frame sank, those soft ginkgo leaves accumulated beneath her, collapsed layer upon layer, releasing a continuous succession of faint, crisp, and deeply healing rustling sounds. This sound was exceptionally clear and gentle in the stillness of the midnight, like an old friend whispering a lullaby that spanned hundreds of millions of years of time and space in her ear. The gentle moonlight poured without reservation upon her splendid yet soft flight feathers. Those feathers, which were a fluid display of color during the day, actually reflected a jade-like microglow at this second. The night breeze blew silently, weaving through the branches of the ginkgo tree, bearing waves of dense, deep pine resin fragrance that thoroughly wrapped the encampment. 2 thoroughly dried ginkgo leaves with slightly curled edges drifted down from the higher branches under the gentle push of the night breeze, landing with a soft patter. They fell exceptionally light and gentle precisely between the root junction of her 2 long tail feathers, that crisp vibration traveling directly through the feather shafts into her heart. At that single second, all the defense, heaviness, and epical survival pressures accumulated over a lifetime were completely released and reconciled within the rustling of the fallen leaves. She knew she had flown upon this world for long enough. Through her own vulnerability and elegance, she had propped up secure nights for the lives in this canopy. Now, it was time to surrender all exhaustion to the boundless night. She adjusted the angle of her tiny head slightly, casually snuggling into her wings, and closed her eyes. From the exact moment the Confuciusornis closed her eyes completely, the string of destiny that had been taut within her body for countless eras finally welcomed its slowest, warmest landing. Her massive, rock-solid will thoroughly merged into this silent soil at this second, becoming an eternal part of this ancient forest. The night breeze began to grow increasingly light and tender, like a pair of magical hands gently caressing every feather texture upon her skin, whisking away the final traces of tension. As time drifted silently, more and more tiny forest creatures arrived at her side. They were no longer afraid, simply falling into sweet slumbers beneath her vast frill. Note, text content switches here. Under her protection, this tiny circular clearing became the ultimate dream cradle of the latest Cretaceous period, the safest and most conflict-free sanctuary, insulated from all external cruelty. The respiration of the Chasmosaurus, note, text content switches here, became exceptionally prolonged and faint, each inhalation like listening to the whispers of the earth, and each exhalation passing its inner tranquility to its surroundings. Its heart rate decelerated inch by inch in the dark, from once every few seconds, to once every 10 seconds, until it finally merged seamlessly into the deep pulse of the earth, silent and trackless. In the depths of its consciousness, the slaughter upon the barrens dissolved into nothingness, and those unsettling, burning clouds in the sky cleared away completely, leaving only an endless canopy of serene stars. This choice of life, utilizing massiveness to carry gentleness, and stillness to guard the vulnerable, allowed it to live out the noblest posture in that primordial dawn filled with destructive powers. When hundreds of millions of years of environmental shifts transformed this ancient forest into deep rock walls and fossils, its bones still maintained this stable posture of resting silently upon the mossy ground. That was not the shattered skeleton of a creature that died struggling in despair, but an ancient traveler who had quietly slept for hundreds of millions of years wrapped in ultimate safety and envelopment. It uses its life to tell us that the ultimate meaning of power is never to destroy or conquer anything, but to be able to become the most reliable harbor for others when the storm arrives. Today, that Cretaceous continent which once drove countless primordial behemoths into frenzy and destruction has long since turned into silent rock strata through the vicissitudes of time. Those predatory overlords that once sprinted at full speed under the sun, invincible in their power, have ultimately become cold, cracked, shattered frames inside museums, leaving people to imagine them out of thin air. Yet, when we reopen the memory of the Confuciusornis on this quiet night, we can still feel the deepest power of serenity traveling across hundreds of millions of years of time and space. Those 2 long tail feathers, once misconstrued as a flight burden, eventually turned into the ultimate symbol of gentleness, restraint, and absolute security through the filter of time. It uses the epic of its life to gently tell us that in this volatile world always hurrying you to run at full speed, always leaving you anxious and terrified, learning to bring yourself to a standstill on a quiet night and transforming into a stable rock to accept the caress of the breeze is a deeper life wisdom. The night wind has completely subsided now, all the clamor, all the disputes, and all the rushing of the outside world have been thickly filtered through the slow flow of this story. Within this warm blanket belonging exclusively to you, there is no longer anything that requires you to grit your teeth and defend, nor is there any unknown tomorrow demanding you to sprint at full speed. Just like that clever Confuciusornis, draw your breath exceptionally long and slow, letting every exhausted joint relax completely within the soft bedding. The ancient moonlight has pierced through the dust of eons, spilling a sheet of the gentlest silver white at the edge of your dreams, quietly guarding the peace deep within your heart. Listening to the low narration by your ear, and feeling that sleepiness deep within your brain growing heavier and more intense, let your consciousness gently sink alongside the lake-like silence. Sleep now, confidently surrender all the burdens of the day to this all-embracing night, and peacefully drift into the deepest dreamscape under the slow-motion lens of time. Good night, distant and gentle ancient woods, good night, to every kind living being reclaiming its soul in the slow cadence of life.